Welcome to Stress-Free IEP. You do not need to do it all alone. With your host, Frances Schefter, Principal of Schefter Law. You can get more details and catch prior episodes at www.schefterlaw.com. The Stress-Free IEP video podcast is also posted on YouTube and LinkedIn, and you can listen to episodes through Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and more. Now, here's the host of Stress-Free IEP, Frances Schefter.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show. Today's guest is Lauri Getlan-Watson, who is a teacher and an artist with over 30 years of experience in the field of education and art. She considers herself a creative catalyst. Lauri has a master's degree from Johns Hopkins University and has studied at MICA, which is the Maryland Institute College of Art. She's also a single mom of twins who are almost 14 years old, and she works with Neurographica Art, which is a data and science-based art method that allows people to relieve stress, anxiety, and limiting beliefs. And as I'm sure you guys, most of us have not heard of Neurographica Arts, which is why I'm really excited about having Lauri on. And Neurographica Art helps the brain bring the subconscious to the conscious and help students with focus and productivity. So Neurographica Art also provides employers a holistic method for productivity, goal setting, stress relief, and planning to the employees. So it is an amazing thing. I don't even know what to call it, technique. But Lauri, tell us more. Like Neurographica Art, I know when I first met you, I was like, what is this? How does it do? What is it? How did you discover it?
I had the same. Well, first, thank you for having me, Frances. I really appreciate the time and opportunity. I actually had the same exact reaction. As you mentioned, I have twins, and I've been a teacher for over 30 years, and I work with students with special needs and learning disabilities and who are neurodivergent. And throughout my years, I always am trying to find new tools to put into my toolbox to help my students, especially when it comes to focus and when it comes to executive functioning. And my own children have those requirements as well. And so as an artist, we're always doing things in art journaling and drawing. And I was doing some research looking at the brain and how it works in relationship to a creative modality. And I discovered this word, Neurographica Art. And I did a little bit more research, and I discovered that actually in 2014, a Russian psychologist is the developer of this modality. And it's been proven that Neurographica Art brings, as we had said in the intro, that subconscious to the conscious. But when working with neurodivergent students and adults, it allows for a process to be able to put us into a focus, meditative state almost. And it allows for that calming that we need and for that realignment that many of our students need when they're in it, right? And it's hard for them to come back. That this is a wonderful modality to utilize for them to be able to have that grounding. And it has so many other wonderful effects as well in terms of being able to move past fears, limiting beliefs, as we had mentioned. It allows for students to be able to gain more of a focus and productivity, because we know that once our mind settles, we're able to move on.
Right. And it's more than just coloring.
More than just coloring, yes. It's based in an intuitive line design. And so there's a whole process which also helps with the executive function component that many of our students who are neurospicy, as I like to say, have issue with, right? It's hard for them for the executive function to put things in order, to be able to follow steps, to be able to have things organized. So Neurographica Art has a specific process that it actually walks through. And that process includes setting an intention, learning how to draw a line that is not a thoughtful line, shall we say, but it is a line that is completely internally fluid. So if your hand is going on the paper and you're saying to yourself, oh my goodness, I need to draw more lines up in the right, you should completely do the opposite. So it's intuitive.
Okay. Yeah.
And then there's a process with lines after you do the line drawing called rounding corners. This also takes our students into that meditative state, that grounding state. And the process for that is because lines in nature that intersect have a hard angle, right? A sharp stopping point. And when we see two lines at a crisscross, our body, believe it or not, automatically, intrinsically reacts to that as like a stopping point. And so when we're done with all of the line drawing, we then go back into it. And everywhere that there's an intersecting line, you round the corners of those lines. And that's why I always tell people to start with a small piece of paper, because when you see a large one and you see how many lines are intersecting, you think to yourself, oh my gosh, how am I going to ever do this and finish it? Right.
It's so interesting because, like, so my daughter goes to physical therapy. She's on the spectrum, and a couple of the things that the physical therapist does is that she calls them lazy eights, the infinity sign. And I know that because I know that connects with the brain and is something like that. And then the other thing with drawing that she does is the labyrinth. And it's like there's a way to do it with like the 4 dots and the lines. And then she, which is, I know, meditative, but it's also connecting the brain and doing stuff beyond. Like, my daughter thinks it's cool because, like, look, I just made this maze with dots and lines and squigglies, but I know it's doing connecting more stuff. And it's so interesting to me how art and body movement connect so much in the brain that we don't realize, right?
Absolutely. I think that the creative modalities is unfortunately the lowest modality that's looked into to help students who are neurodivergent. And if anything, this is the one area, the creative component and creative area, that neurodivergent students actually excel in the most. Because it's freeing. And while there's a specific protocol, shall we say, for the algorithm that you use in Neurographica Art, it's still a freeing, and the person doing it does not feel like they are being held to specific rules, because you don't have to draw the line up in the right-hand corner. You don't have to worry about your pencil going off of the page. You don't have to worry whether or not you have 43 squiggles. And one of the differences actually with like the infinity sign, that's a repetitive pattern, right? And that puts our brain into that meditative state. But it's the same thing over and over. And the Neurographica allows for our students, our children, to feel like they can go anywhere on the page, and it's still the process that they're working through.
So it's still a method that you have to follow, but it's not this has to go here, that has to go there, and this has to go there.
Exactly.
Oh, amazing.
I love it because it reminds me where, unfortunately, when we're younger, we all get that programming of, oh, the sky's blue. Why aren't you coloring it blue? Oh, you can't color the grass orange. Grass isn't orange, it's green. And why can't the grass be orange? Maybe someone spray painted it, and now the grass that I'm seeing in front of my house is orange, right? And it's that boxes us in. And it's from that I feel is the reason why so many of us, even as adults, say, oh, I'm not creative. I'm not an
Yeah.
artist. I can't do this. And I tell people all the time, all you need is a piece of paper and like a black marker. That's it. That's all you need. And if you don't have a black marker, you can use a pencil. And the beauty of it is that it can be done anywhere and everywhere. And while, as you mentioned, there are those little bits of a protocol, there are no rules, which is the beauty of it.
Yeah. One of the things that has always made me crazy is art teachers, especially in elementary schools, like I
Right.
love them. I know, I get it, but it's like, okay, today we're going to make a face. So first we're going to draw a circle eye and then another circle eye and a nose like this and a mouth like this. And so kids are taught, this is how you do art. Mine has to look like what the teacher has made. Where's the
Right.
creativity in that?
Exactly. Right? That's so funny that you bring that up, because one of the things this isn't necessarily the Neurographica component, but I do have students where we do the Neurographica as a background portion. And then when it comes to drawing a face, I use dice and we roll them on the table. And I have different kinds of eyes if you roll on a 2, different type of a mouth if you roll on a 4 versus if you roll on a 5. And it's like a Picasso. And I agree with you. That's a part of that whole programming. Yeah. And it's just, I always like to remind people, like, everyone is a creative, because if we weren't meant to create, well, we're creation, right? If we weren't create, we wouldn't be given 10 paintbrushes, right? And a means in which to create.
Right. And it's so, like, I think about the sip and paints that everybody does these days, and people are like, oh, I could never paint that. I could never paint that. And I remember thinking that, even though I did study art in Italy for a semester, like, I still like, well, I couldn't paint that it looked like that, and I couldn't paint, but you know what? I could. It doesn't look exactly like theirs, but when you, again, break it down, like when I look at something and say, can I paint that? No. Can I paint this? Yes. And then you put enough of thises and that's together, and guess what? You get the full picture, right?
Absolutely.
And that's the point.
Absolutely. And with the Neurographica art, the beauty of it is that it's all little bits and pieces that you're doing at once, because it's all free form and it's all intuitive, and you're not thinking about what you're doing. And I mean, one of the best ways, if someone is wondering, well, what is an intuitive line? The best way for me to give as an example for someone to practice what an intuitive line is that's an oxymoron. You can't practice it. Number one, it's an intuitive line, right? But take a piece of paper and you take, let's say, a coin, use a penny, if you still have any, since they seem to not be existing soon. But take a coin, a dime, and take your pencil and just push it around the paper, wherever the dime goes, wherever the coin goes, a button you can use, wherever that's moving and your pencil is following it. That's an intuitive line. You're not thinking where you're pushing it. The button is moving on its own, in its own pathway. And you can't say, oh, button, don't turn this way on the paper. That's just the way it moves on the paper. And so that's an example of what an intuitive line would feel like.
I'm just thinking about how much that's got to relate into life in its own.
Oh,
like, I'm just thinking about, like, how afraid are we, like, as adults, especially, because as kids, we're not as afraid, but as we get older, of like, what if I'm doing it wrong? What if I'm doing it wrong? You're not doing it wrong. There's no way of doing it wrong. And I can imagine at the end of it, like, look at this beautiful thing I created without even thinking about it.
100%. I think that we limit ourselves as adults. And, we always, even just for being able to say, oh, I can't do that here, or I can't do that there. Neurographica art can literally be done anywhere. Like, you can, if you're feeling stress and you're in a restaurant and you have a napkin and you have a pencil in your bag, a pen in your bag, you can do it on the napkin. Like there are no limitations for it. I have a small little notebook that I carry with me everywhere. It fits in my bag. And if I am feeling stressed about where I'm going or anxious, or I just need to calm my mind, let's say I've been out for a long day and I'm tired and I just need to ground myself, I'll pull it out. And I mean, of course, not if I'm the person driving, but if I'm on Metro or something like that, or I'm just taking a break and sitting down in a park or wherever I may be in the middle of the mall on a bench. I've done it actually.
Wow.
And just pull my notebook out and I just start. And that's one of the wonderful things that I think parents don't realize either, is that there are methods. This is a modality and a method that you can do with your child anywhere. I mean, I think about my own children and in a restaurant and getting agitated and getting, frustrated because it's taking so long, or it's crowded, or we have to wait in line for a table. Whatever the situation may be, you can do this anywhere at any time. While there are different, we call them algorithms, different methods of going through it for different purposes. So there's an algorithm for productivity, which I call my Neurographica vision board. There's an algorithm for stress and anxiety. There's an algorithm for team building, believe it or not. And so these different algorithms have different parts to it, but all of them can be done anywhere. You just have to learn what they are.
So I guess so that's what you do. You teach people the algorithms.
I do.
And practice with them until they know it well enough to go out on their own and just do it whenever they need to.
Yes. Usually I like to say that Neurographica, your purpose for your intention on your drawing needs to be a repetitive process. Okay. So even if it's for stress relief, while you're doing the Neurographica component and the art itself at that moment in time, and it is releasing stress, your cortisol levels are lowering, it's still good practice to do it again the next day, because you're training your brain in a way to be able to go through that process and to be able to understand the feelings with that process, and then to have it become second nature. So oftentimes I'll do like different 2 to 3 sessions with someone, and that's really all it takes. And they're not very long. The first session is always the longest because it involves more explanation and reasoning behind things. But I usually find that within 2 to 3 sessions, we're good to go. And then my clients can take it with them. And then if they have questions, always can come back to ask and clarify. But usually within 2 to 3 times, they're ready to be independent with it. And then they get their own little notebooks and they take them with them.
Right. So for each session, do you do like one type, like just for stress and anxiety, and then you would do like another set of sessions to learn for a different technique?
Yes, that's a great question. Yes. Thank you for asking, because we're using our subconscious, right, to bring forward the purpose and the meaning of that specific algorithm and protocol. So we don't want the wires to get crossed, so to speak. So we want to focus on one specific at a time. So if we're looking at productivity, when I did a session actually with a gaming company up in Toronto. We were on Zoom, so this can be done virtually as well as in person. So I can work with people all over the world. And we worked on productivity. That was one session. And then we ended up doing a different session that was for stress relief. And it was amazing because I was getting an email back from the HR person who had contracted me to do this with their employees saying, Lauri, you're not going to believe this. People are posting their Neurographica creations from stress relief up on Telegram, which is great, right? That you have adults. And so there would be different sessions for
got to make sure they tag you in that.
I know, right? Exactly.
Look what I did.
Exactly.
Yeah, and put their feelings. I'm loving this more and more because it's just, my daughter turns to art. Both of my daughters actually turn to art a lot. Of course, my older one, she's obsessed with learning how to make money and selling things now is her new
That's
thing. She's
amazing.
11. Yeah, and so now she's doing art and selling them and then buying more supplies and starting to, she wants me to set up an Etsy account, which I'll do eventually.
That's
But it's
great.
like, I'm just thinking like teaching her something like this, she can combine the two.
Yes.
So like, and then sell the product that she makes.
Absolutely.
Because
Absolutely.
the stress, she has a lot, she has anxiety, which I say all the time with autism, it's almost always you have anxiety also, because it's just, especially our kids that are, I hate saying higher functioning, but that are more aware mentally of their, that the anxiety of like, I'm different. Why am I different?
And thinking about that is, I think, really key, especially with our audience, is that our kids who are in that component, in that category, shall we say, with being more aware and high functioning, oftentimes it's the state of not knowing what I can do in that moment at that given time to be able to bring myself back to center, right? I mean, you can be told, look, I do breathing exercises. I'm completely into somatics and all of that. It works beautifully, but it doesn't work beautifully for everyone at every time in every situation.
Yep.
Now, I'm not going to make a blanket statement that Neurographica will either, per se, but it definitely is another modality that you can do in any situation pretty much and anywhere.
And that's why they say to have a toolbox.
Exactly.
Because like in some situations, sitting and drawing will work for me. Other situations, I might need to go for a walk, like depending on what's happening. And I wanted to circle back around to that you said to practice it when you're not in a state, because that's one thing that people forget is that they're like, well, when I'm dysregulated, I have to do X, Y, Z. But no, you need to practice that when you're not dysregulated. Mm-hmm. So that when you become dysregulated, it's second nature of like, oh yeah, let me sit down and draw. Because if not, how's it get, it's, once I have this issue with parents not parents in schools with IEPs and stuff. I'm like, they have in the IEP, we'll use a coping strategy. Okay, well, how are they going to know to use the coping strategy?
Yes.
How are they going to know to use the list? How are they going to learn to use the coping strategy? When are you practicing it with them? Like, well, when they're dysregulated, I'm like, that doesn't work.
No, right? Because you're in the moment. That's not the time to teach it. The time to teach it is beforehand so that oh, I'm feeling this way. I learned this modality. This is a thing in my toolkit that I can do right now. This is what I'm going to use.
Right. And unless you practice it.
Yes. And you know what? I think what you say, Frances, is so important because it also brings us back to our kids having that sense of ownership, right?
Yeah.
It's another tool that they can feel confident in. That's easy enough for them to do once they've learned it and mastered the process behind it, for them to feel independent enough and have ownership enough of being able to take care of themselves. Because when they're in that moment, asking for help sometimes is the very last thing that they're able to do.
Yep. Yeah. And it's making me think about like, my kids obviously use me to co-regulate a lot, which is fine. I'm okay with it. It's hard sometimes because there's times I'm like, I'm not regulated myself. And I'm like, and I just I can't, but then I have to suck it up and like, okay, let me regulate them. And then I can go take care of myself. But this is a tool of teaching our kids of how to regulate themselves and how to be independent. And I'm just thinking about how wonderful this would be for like so many parents, like to learn to do, to teach their kids to do this so that their kids learn that independence. Because guess what? We're not always there. We can't always regulate,
And for the parents to learn with their child.
Yep.
how to do this, do it together. I do so many with mom and child, dad and child, mom and dad and child, whomever it may be. Because then, I mean, you just said it, we're not always regulated in the space where we need to be ourselves as adults with our children when they're deregulated, right?
Yep.
How awesome is it now? How fabulous is it that you've learned this process along with your child, so you know how to get them set and situated and started to the point where they can hear you say, you know what, pull out your notebook, let's do a Neurographica piece. And they can do that independently. And then you may still be feeling dysregulated as an adult after the fact, and your kid's already in bed, they're asleep, and you're on the sofa, and you're just like, I can't watch another reality TV show or something, but I'm still feeling a bit like stressed out or high strung from the day, and it was just rough. And I just need to bring my brain back to just peace and not thinking. And that's the other part, is that when you're going through the actual process and doing especially the rounding of the corners part of the process, your brain is going into that meditative mode. It's a meditative state. And so for our parents, this is a beautiful technique that you can use in your home at any time for yourself, just so that you yourself can feel whole and centered and come back grounded.
And I love that you say that. And I was thinking, as you were saying that, to say to your child to, hey, pull out your notebook, let's do, is my thought was like, you know what? Is like, if my daughter and I are at one of those points and we're both, is just for me to say, you know what? I'm just not feeling in the right space right now. I'm going to pull out my notebook and do some Neurographica art.
Yes.
And so like not telling, so my daughter has pathological demand avoidance. So telling her to do something is not going to work. But me saying, I'm going to do that, chances are she's gonna be like, oh yeah, good idea. I'm going to do that too, And so
the modeling.
The modeling of like, and also to teach our kids that, guess what? Yes, we're adults. We have more experience, but we get dysregulated also.
A lot.
Right. It's okay. Like, there's been times like, look, I'm human. I say there's been times I've lost it and went off on my kids. And, after the fact, I'm like, oh my God, what did I just do? And I'll go back in and be like, yo, I'm so sorry. Honey, mommy lost it. And, I probably shouldn't have grounded you for the entire month, because that probably doesn't exactly fit the crime. So we're going to talk through this and see what is an appropriate thing, and like show, like, look, hey, it happens to me too, and that's okay.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Just because, like, I'm a strong believer of say what you mean and mean what you say. But when I realized that, like, okay, my punishment might have been a little harder than it needed to be because I wasn't in the right mindset, I can still go back and be like, okay, so even though I said this, I realized I was wrong in that.
Mm-hmm.
And now let's talk about what would be a right thing to help change this behavior so it doesn't keep happening.
Yes.
Because I don't like how I feel when it happens, and I know you don't like how you feel. So what can we do to make it different?
And what a great learning moment too, right? Yeah. For her to be able to see that it's okay, we make mistakes, but we have ownership of it and accountability for it, and we're able to apologize for something that we realize may not have been appropriate, and then we can start over again. And that's like tying back to the Neurographica Art. It's never ending. You can continue it. You can keep starting over. You can do it as many times as you need to do. It's not like a one-stop shop.
Right. That's awesome. So I know you said that you worked with a gaming company on productivity and then on the stress relief and stuff. So it's not always one-on-one. It can be a group. It can be the whole family.
Yes, absolutely.
Does it make a difference? Like, is it better or worse, or
No, I think that it just really, it depends upon the outcome you want to have. If you're looking at productivity, like for businesses, I did that as a one session with 25 employees on a Zoom call. And you have the time during that session where, whether you're with as a family or as a business and your employees, you're given the time to actually go through that process of rounding the corners. So if I'm booked with a client for an hour, I always let the client know, especially if it's for their child, look, just know that if you're walking in and out of the room while we're on our call together and training, that it might be quiet. You may just hear some music in the background, and you may hear that for about 20 minutes of our call, because I want them to work through that process with the rounding of the corners. I want them, the student, to feel what it feels like while they're going through that process. And then afterwards, we talk about the process and we talk about how it felt. And there's a whole process with setting intention beforehand that requires a 2-minute writing exercise, which is just words that are correlated in a certain method before you get into the actual intuitive line drawing, which is the second part. So it's the intention with the words, then it's the intuitive lines, then it's the rounding the corners. Then there's another part where we do a grounding line, it's called an anchoring line. And there's a process for that. And then afterwards, if you want, not everyone wants to, but there's a method for coloring it, for using colored pencils or highlighters or crayons.
So my next question is gonna be like, hey, okay, so what do we do and how do we get started? Because I'm thinking like right now, like I need to call you after the show and get my family to do it. I think I would love, I don't know if I could get my husband to, but if I say, hey, this is a family thing that we're helping the kids, so it'd be great if you understood it. You know, that
Sure.
roundabout, I hope he never watches my show, but I would say that roundabout way of getting them to do things, and that, you know, like,
right.
Kids, honey, for the kids.
You work your magic.
Exactly. So like, what is the process? So somebody like me is saying like, hey, I want to do this. What's the process getting started with you? What is that?
I think just honestly reaching out to me. I'm on Facebook. Lauri Getlan-Watson I do everything with business also on my personal profile page. So you can feel free to send me a private message if anyone listening is interested. My email is also available. And my email is Lauri, Lauri, at Lilies and Poppies, LILIESANDPOPPIES.com. So people can email me if they would like, or I think the easiest is to find me on Facebook, social media, and just reach out, and then we can talk, see what your intentions are and what specific area you're looking to use the Neurographica Art for. And then it's as easy as setting up a time on the calendar.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. And all of the links will be in when it gets published officially, all of everything will be in there. But this is like, I'm serious. If you don't hear from me within a week, please reach out to me and be like, yo,
okay, I will.
Because I think I love the idea, and I think it would be beneficial for all of us. Like, I mean, who wouldn't it be beneficial for? Is what I'm thinking.
Right.
And I'm like, I wonder, I don't know. We'll talk about like other, like I'm just thinking of groups of, mom groups that I'm in, and then maybe we'll, I can host something like that, or for everybody to learn it or something. That we'll talk about that. We'll get on the call.
That would be fabulous. Look, I always say an hour of time, like honestly, that's all you need is an hour of time to learn the algorithm for the specific area that you want to utilize, whether it's the stress relief or the productivity. That one takes maybe an hour and 10 minutes, but let's just average it out for an hour. For an hour of your time, a parent and a child can have an infinite amount of creative output and a new modality to use when they feel it is necessary. And it's the easiest thing. You don't have to bring a whole bunch of supplies. You do not have to go to the art store. You don't have to go buy paints and a canvas, although I do that as well. I do art therapy within the realm of abstract art. But this, you don't need anything. It's simple. Two to three pieces of material, paper, a black pen, or a pencil. Yeah. Done.
And that's something you can that, like, you don't even have to have with you. I'm sure, like, wherever you are, you can buy, like, hey, do you got a pen and pencil?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh my God. I'm so glad we met.
It's a pleasure. Me too. I even say, you know what? If you have an eyeliner in your bag, you can even do it.
There you go. Makes sense. Like, seriously, anything that writes would work. I could see that. So thank you so much for being on the show and sharing all of your wisdom. And I will definitely talk to you soon.
Yes, Frances, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
You've been listening to Stress Free IEP with your host, Frances Schefter. Remember, you do not need to do it all alone. You can reach Frances through schefterlaw.com, where prior episodes are also posted. Thank you for your positive reviews, comments, and sharing the show with others through YouTube, LinkedIn, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and more.